much indeed, Claire, and it's a pleasure to be here in Motherwell. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many people here this evening, particularly given the weather's so nice and there's lots of sport on television. Incidentally, I should say at the outset, if anybody happens to be keeping one eye on their phone tonight and see any action from the swimming, going to let me know if we win any more medals. Not that we've not won quite a few already, which is absolutely brilliant. Scotland beat our record today in terms of the number of gold medals we've ever won in a Commonwealth Games. I'm quietly optimistic that by the time the night's out, we'll have beaten the record for the total number of medals we've ever won in a Commonwealth Games. But if we don't do it tonight, we'll do it before the week is out. Thank you very much for being here. It is awesome to look out and see so many people here tonight. I'm pretty sure there are people, I can see from some of the badges and lanyards, that there are people here tonight who are passionate supporters of the Yes campaign, and that is fantastic. I'm pretty sure there'll be a few people in here tonight who, as of now, are planning to vote no in the referendum, and I hope I can try and persuade you this evening to at least give that a second thought. And I guess, as there are at all of these meetings that I'm taking part in, a fair number of people here who've yet to make up their mind. And again, I hope I can give you some information tonight, some facts, some figures, some arguments that help take you from the undecided camp closer to being in the Yes camp. But one of the wonderful things about this campaign so far is just the sheer number of people in every single part of the country who are excited, interested, energised, who want to take part. I'm doing these meetings literally the length and breadth of the country right now, and no matter where I go, from the biggest school gym hall to the smallest village hall, there is one thing that all of these meetings have in common: they are full to capacity with people. And do you know what? Whatever side of this debate you're on, whether you've not yet made up your mind, that is really fantastic for our democracy in Scotland. The fact that so many of us, some of us perhaps for the first time ever, are taking a real interest in how our country is governed, in who takes decisions for us and what those decisions are and what they should be. And after this referendum, hopefully that will have a long-lasting legacy and will be a more informed, a more engaged population. And some of these people that are planning to vote, maybe for the very first time ever in the referendum on the 18th of September, will find that they want to keep voting and vote in elections for many years to come. So well done for being here and wanting to be part in what is the biggest opportunity our country will ever have to take control of our own future. Now, the most important thing about tonight is not me standing here speaking to you. The most important thing about tonight is you getting the opportunity to ask me questions, and that is particularly important for those of you in the audience who have not yet made up your mind or who are perhaps veering towards being a no voter. So I want to say to you at the outset that you should feel free to ask me anything you want tonight, within reason, obviously, about the referendum, I should say. Sometimes when I do these meetings, I'll usually get some people who come up afterwards and say, I want to ask you this question, but I didn't want to ask it in front of everybody because I thought people might think it was silly. Well, there's no such thing as a silly question in this debate. If it's something that is in your mind, if it's something that is going to be a factor in how you decide to vote, then it's important. It's important to you, and therefore it's important to me. So whatever it is you want to ask, no matter how big a question or how small a question, please feel free to ask it of me, and I'll do my best to give you an answer that is straightforward, frank, open and honest, and then you can decide whether you like the answer or not and what it means in terms of your decision as to how to vote. What I'm going to do tonight in advance of that, though, is give you the general case for Scotland being a normal, independent country. And I use that word normal very deliberately because in some ways what we're going through in Scotland right now is quite rare. There's not many countries in the world get the chance to choose to be independent entirely peacefully and democratically. And we're really lucky to be in that position. So on that level, what we are doing just now in the process we're going through is quite rare. But on another level, it's not rare at all. Because being... That's all right. Okay, are we all right with that now? They might not have wanted to have seen my face, they might just have wanted to listen. On one level, what we're going through right now is not unusual, because becoming independent and being independent is actually not unusual at all. There have been, in the years since the end of the Second World War, no fewer than 150 countries that have decided to do what we are thinking about doing just now, which is become independent. At the end of the Second World War, the United Nations had a membership of round about 50. Today, the United Nations has got a membership of round about 200 countries. So the 150 countries that were added to the United Nations over that time are countries that have decided to become independent. So becoming independent and being independent is not unusual. It's actually the normal state of affairs for countries. So that's why I use the word normal when I say I'm going to make the case that Scotland should become a normal independent country. And I'm going to make that case with reference to the three general questions I get asked most often as I tour around Scotland speaking to people about the referendum. Now, as I said earlier on, there'll be loads of detailed questions that you want to ask and that we'll cover over the course of the evening. But the three general questions I get asked most often are these ones. Firstly, can we really do this? You know, are we big enough? Are we strong enough? Are we rich enough as a country to stand on our own 2 feet and be independent? And secondly, people will very often ask, okay, so you've convinced me we can do this, but why should we do it? What are the benefits to being an independent country? What is it about being independent that makes this worthwhile? And thirdly, people often ask, what happens if we don't vote yes? What are the consequences of not voting yes and having a no vote in the referendum? So these are the three questions I'm going to try as briefly as possible to answer for you this evening, and then I'll make some concluding remarks, and then we can get into the meat of the evening, which is you getting the chance to interrogate me. So let me start with that first question. Can we do this? Now, that's a really important question. It's an essential question for many people, because unless I can convince you that we have got what it takes to be independent, that we are big enough and strong enough and rich enough, I'm not going to be able to convince you about why we should be independent. So it's a legitimate, valid, important question to ask. But notwithstanding that, sometimes I think it's quite a strange question for a country like Scotland still to be asking itself. You know, Scotland is, in global terms, a relatively small country. Not the smallest in the world by any stretch of the imagination, but relatively small. But Scotland has made, down the generations, an enormous contribution to the world. You know, I read a book a couple of years ago, which if anybody's looking for a good book to read, I would recommend. It's a book by a Canadian guy called Arthur Herman, and the book is entitled How Scotland Invented the Modern World. And when you think about it, that's not too far from the truth. You know, you think about all the big inventions and innovations down the generations, from the telephone to the television, penicillin, tarmac, ultrasound, the overdraft. Apparently we invented the overdraft, but we don't really talk about that one quite so much. More recent times, you know, the biggest scientific innovation probably of my lifetime, Dolly the sheep. Grand Theft Auto. How many people here have ever played Grand Theft Auto? Now, there's an enthusiast over here. But the serious point is, computer game taking the world by storm, invented and developed here in Scotland. So we're a country that's small in size, but massive in terms of the contribution that we've made to the world. And yet we still find ourselves wondering and questioning whether we've got what it takes to be independent. And maybe that's because for a long time there have been a lot of people telling us we are too small and too weak and too poor to be independent. Well, I'm here tonight to tell you that that is not true, and that we are absolutely capable of being an independent country. Do you know, if we were independent right now, we would be the 14th richest country in the world. I said earlier on there's about 200 countries in the world. We'd be the 14th richest. And how that's calculated is we take all of the wealth that our economy produces and divided by the number of people who live here, that gives you what's called your GDP, gross domestic product, per head of population. We'd be the 14th richest. Richer per head of population than countries like Japan, France, the UK itself. The UK is number 80. Now that's not a bad position to be in, but an independent Scotland would be 4 places above that. And you know the interesting thing, or the more interesting thing, even more interesting than the fact we'd be the 14th richest, is if you look at the countries that sit above us in that global league table of wealthy countries, the ones in the top 10, for example, they tend to be small countries, countries very similar in size to Scotland. The Norways, the Denmarks, the Swedens of this world, they're the ones that sit in the top 10 of the world's richest countries. So we're one of the wealthiest countries on the face of this planet. Now, often when I say that to people, you get in response what I've taken to describing the but response. You know, it's a very typically Scottish response. You know, the streets might be paved with gold, but. And the but response is, but that's all about oil. And what happens when the oil runs out? We'll have nothing left when the oil runs out. Well, that is nonsense. Yes, oil is a big, big bonus in our economy. You know, most independent countries in the world don't have oil, and they manage quite well being independent countries. So oil is a big bonus. Unlike countries like Norway, that has also discovered oil, of course, Westminster has squandered our oil revenues over the 40 years we've had them instead of investing some of them in an oil fund like Norway has done. Oil's a fantastic resource and a fantastic bonus, but it is not the be-all and end-all of the Scottish economy. In fact, the Scottish economy is less dependent, if I can use that word, on oil than the Norwegian economy. Oil reserves, oil revenues make up about 30% of all of the tax revenues in Norway. In Scotland, the equivalent figure is only 15%. So we're less dependent on oil than Norway, and you never hear anybody say that Norway isn't rich enough to be an independent country. So don't let anybody tell you it's all about oil. Scotland is in a lucky, lucky position of having the fantastic resource that is oil and gas, but also having a range of other strong economic sectors. I've already mentioned computer games. Our creative industry is fantastic. We export about £13 billion, or we turn over about £13 billion of food and drink products every single year. We've got a manufacturing industry that could be doing a lot better, but is nevertheless strong. Company in Falkirk manufactures buses that you'll find in many other countries across the world. Life sciences that I also mentioned, world-leading life sciences sector here in Scotland. Tourism, you know, it's being felt, the benefit of it being felt in the city of Glasgow and the surrounding areas right now as a result of the Commonwealth Games. And of course, as well as oil and gas, we've got renewable energy. And here's a wee secret for you. Renewable energy never, ever, ever runs out. So we are a lucky country in the breadth and range and depth of our economic strength. That's why the big credit rating agency, one of these big companies that's job is to predict or give countries around the world credit ratings, Standard & Poor's, one of the biggest of these credit ratings agencies, said that if Scotland was independent, then even without oil and gas reserves, an independent Scotland would still qualify for its highest economic assessment. So we are a rich country, one of the richest in the world. And my final point on this can we do it question is this. We're not subsidised. Don't let anybody in the No campaign or anywhere else tell you that Scotland is subsidised, because it's not true. We pay our way. We pay for the services that we enjoy here in Scotland. In fact, if I was to tell you that in each and every single one of the past 30 years, 33 years I think to be precise, Scotland has generated more tax per head of population than the UK as a whole, you'd probably be surprised. Because again, we've spent ages being told that we're subsidised and we rely on money being sent up from London to keep us going. That is not the case. We are a wealthy economy, a diverse economy, an economy that produces massive wealth. We can be an independent country, and don't ever let anybody cast doubt in your mind about that point. And my plea to you tonight, and it's a plea from the heart, obviously I hope all of you decide to vote yes on the 18th of September, but if there's anybody in this room that decides not to vote yes, that is entirely your decision. Each and every person in Scotland has to come to their own decision for their own reasons. But please, if you decide not to vote yes, do not let it be because somebody has managed to convince you that Scotland doesn't have what it takes to be independent, because nothing, absolutely nothing, could be further from the truth. That's the first question I wanted to address with you this evening. The second question is, why should we do this? My mother used to say to me when I was growing up that just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. And I'll leave it to your imagination to think what she might have been talking about when she gave me those lectures. The reason we should be independent is, at its heart, quite simple. It's so that the decisions that shape what kind of country Scotland is, how successful our economy is, how fair our society is, so that those decisions can be taken here in Scotland by those of us who've got the biggest stake in getting those decisions right. And that's those of us who live here, who work here, who run businesses here, who raise families here. We won't always get those decisions right. Independence is not a magic wand that you wave and all of Scotland's problems and challenges disappears. But independence is the opportunity for us to be the ones taking the decisions that determine the future of our country, rather than having those decisions taken by politicians in London that are very often politicians we haven't voted for. And why is it important that we get the chance to take decisions about how we use our resources, for example, ourselves? Because I said earlier on that we're the 14th richest country in the world, and we are. But how many people in Scotland really feel like we're the 14th richest country in the world? We live in a society right now where more and more and more people are struggling to make ends meet, where our public services have been subjected to austerity cuts, where more and more people are relying on food banks to feed their children. So we don't feel like we're the 14th richest country in the world, so we need to be able to take decisions here about how we better use our own resources. So if we're independent, it's us, not Westminster, that decides economic policy, that decides how we use the levers of economic policy to persuade more companies to come and invest in Scotland, to set up businesses in Scotland, to expand businesses in Scotland and create more jobs here for our young people to benefit from. If we're independent, we get to determine what kind of welfare state we have, so that we can, I hope, take decisions that help people into work, that says very clearly nobody should get a free ride on the welfare state if they are capable of working, but also one that provides a decent safety net for the disabled and the sick and the people who can't, through no fault of their own, work, instead of the situation right now that we are in, where if we stick on the Westminster path, then by the year 2020, just 6 years from now, it is predicted, not by me or by the Scottish Government or by the Yes campaign, but by children's charities, independent children's charities, that we'll have 100,000 more children in Scotland living in poverty. 100,000 more children. There's already over 100,000 children in Scotland living in poverty. That's too many. We shouldn't be adding to it with any more as a result of Westminster policies that we don't agree with. And if we're independent, we get to decide whether we really think, taking everything into account about the modern world, that it's a good use of £1 billion of our money over the next generation to invest it in new nuclear weapons on the River Clyde, or whether we'd be better advised to invest that money on childcare, on better education and better health, on things that make life better for people here in Scotland. So these are the arguments for us being independent. These are the answers to the question, why should we do this? If we want to turn our rich country into a rich society where we all benefit from Scotland's vast wealth, then we need to have the powers here in Scotland to determine how we use that wealth and what we do with it to build that better country. And the third question is, what happens if we don't take this opportunity? Well, to put it pretty bluntly, these big decisions that determine over time how successful a country Scotland is will continue to be taken elsewhere. And sometimes, if we're very, very lucky, they'll be taken by Westminster governments that we've voted for. But very often, as is the case right now, these decisions like the bedroom tax or the poll tax 25 years ago, they'll be taken by governments that we have rejected overwhelmingly at the ballot box. You know, I'm just turned 44 years old. Meant to have a sharp intake of breath at that point, Stella said. No, well, we try that one again. I'm 44 years old. Thank you, that makes me feel a lot better. But there's never been one occasion in my entire lifetime where Scotland, at a UK general election, has voted anything other than Labour. Labour have won every UK general election in my entire lifetime. Now, I've never voted Labour, and I might not like that fact, but that is what democracy has deemed would be the outcome of these elections. But for more than half of my life, we've had a Tory Prime Minister. How does that work in a democracy? Now, that sounds like an anti-Tory point I'm making, and, you know, hands up, I'm pretty anti-Tory. But it's not really an anti-Tory point. It's a pro-democracy point. It's the governments we vote for should get to be the governments that govern the country, not the parties that we overwhelmingly reject. So if we vote no in September, next May we have the next UK general election. And we have no guarantee, even if every single one of us voted Labour, we have no guarantee that we don't end up with another 5 years of David Cameron and George Osborne imposing more cuts, perhaps taking us out of the European Union, regardless of what we think about that. Is that a chance we want to take? You know, people talk about risk and uncertainty. The biggest risk I can see is us voting no and ending up with another Tory government. And the only way to ensure that doesn't happen is to vote yes. And then we get the governments we collectively vote for. And if that is ever the Tories, then we'll get a Tory government. I'm not sure that will ever happen in my lifetime, but you never know. Stranger things have happened, but it will be what we choose that determines how we're governed as a country. So that's the case for independence in a nutshell. We can do this. We're one of the richest countries in this world. The reasons we should do it are to put ourselves in the driving seat of the decisions that determine our future. It's not a magic wand. I said that earlier on. And you know, anybody on the yes side who tries to tell you that independence is a magic wand that waves away all of our problems should be treated with as much disdain as the person who tells you Scotland's too poor to be independent. But it puts the levers of decision-making into our hands, and that's where they should be. And if we don't vote yes, well, we have nobody to blame but ourselves when the Tories impose more cuts and they implement policies we don't agree with when they squander the next generation of our oil wealth. So that's the case for independence. I want to make two final points, or a couple of final points before I finish. There'll be lots of questions tonight about, you know, some very detailed things. I'm sure we'll hear about Europe and currency and a whole range, pensions, a whole range of very, very important issues. And running through some of these questions, I'm absolutely certain will be a, how can we guarantee that this will be like that, or, you know, this will be like this? Well, I can, in answer to all of these questions, give you what I think are sound, solid, rational, common sense arguments for why I believe certain things will happen after independence. And I believe I'll be proved right on that. But, you know, I can't absolutely guarantee the sun will come up tomorrow morning, but I'm pretty sure it will. But the key point I'm trying to make to you here is this, is life, in any walk of life, always has a degree of uncertainty about it. You know, we all know that. Think about every big decision you've ever made in your own lives. You know, whether that's been leaving home when you were younger, going to university, getting a job, changing job, getting married, moving house, watching your kids leave home to go to university or to get married or get a job. Every single time you've made a big life-changing decision in your own life, there'll have been a part of your brain thinking, am I doing the right thing? What if it doesn't work out? But you do these things, you make these decisions, Because deep down inside, you know they're right. You know that if you have to move on and progress and be in charge of your own life, you've got to take these decisions, and if you don't take them, you might regret not taking them for the rest of your life. And it's a bit like that with independence. Yeah, we might feel a wee bit scared, we might feel a wee bit uncertain, but deep down inside we know that if we don't do this, we might regret it forever. Because we might never get another opportunity. There's no guarantee we will ever get this opportunity again. That's why I think we've got to grasp it with both hands. Nobody will ever make a better job of running this country than people who live here. And if there are 200 other countries in the world that get on perfectly well being independent, no matter the ups and downs they face, they'd never opt not to be independent, then is anybody seriously arguing that Scotland, with all the wealth, with all the resources, with all the talents that we've got, can also be a successful independent country? We absolutely can. You know, on the 18th of September, we've got this rare, precious, wonderful, beautiful opportunity. Each and every one of us. That's what? Alright, sorry. Claire's trying to tell me this is Better Together's latest scare campaign or something, I don't know. Look, seriously, we've got this rare opportunity. You know, on 18th of September, everybody in this country is equal for that one day. We've all got one vote, from the richest person in the country to the poorest person in the country. We've all got one vote, and we all hold the future of our country in our hands on that day. After the polls close, pretty soon after the polls close, we're all going to know whether we've kept control of our country or whether we've handed it straight back to Westminster. I think we should keep control, and I think deep down inside we all know we should keep control of our country, and the only way to do it is to vote yes, and that's what we're doing.